Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is on education, on the conversation on education. I want to talk about communication. Specifically, I want to talk about the 3 C's of communication that will enable you to make your communication clear, to make your communication land. And so when we think about a communication landing, we're thinking about the thing it is that we have to say. It's important that the person receives it the way that we intend it to be received. It's important that they understand the message, that they have a sense as to the importance of it, and that there's the desired action as a result of that communication. So I've always differentiated on this channel the difference between talking and communication. So talking is really an egocentric activity. You do it from a place of self. You don't really need to think about your audience, you're just kind of shooting from the hip. But when it comes to communication, when it matters, when there's choices to be made, when there's an impact that comes from the things that you're saying, you want to make sure that you do everything you can to package that communication in a way so that you give it the opportunity, the packaging or the presentation that is required so that it lands, so that you get the desired outcomes. And so there are 3 C's to communication. I might add a 4th of my own, but I did have a background. So before doing my MBA, just so that you know, I did a double degree with honors in professional writing, specializing in institutional communications and cognitive neuroscience. And both of them talk a little bit about the psychology behind communication, but I'm going to focus more on the technical aspects of communication itself, and this is regardless of the medium you're using. So regardless of whether it is a voice note, a message, a text message, an email, a presentation, like these tenets hold true across all mediums that we leverage to communicate with one another. And so one of the things to really set as a caveat before I go into the 3 C's of communication is preparation. You cannot be an effective communicator if you don't at least take the time to reflect about your audience, understand who they are, understand what their needs are, so that you can build a bridge between what it is that you're looking for and the people that you're looking to get that outcome from. So it's important that you do your homework first. You cannot improvise and expect to be a strong and powerful communicator and expect that communication is going to land. And you can be an expert in the thing that you're talking about. And a lot of us, when it is the case that we're in a position where we're communicating, we do hold some title of expertise, but that doesn't mean you're an expert on your audience, right? And so your audience could be like a general setting, like the domain that you're speaking to, the industry that you're speaking to, that could be your audience. It could be the specific people in the room. It could be the function that you're speaking to. So an audience that is a very technical audience would be a very different audience that would require a very different kind of message than if your audience was a functional audience. And so all of these elements you need to take into consideration when you build and package out your communication, and it's going to translate differently. So my 3 C's are going to look different depending on who you're packaging that communication for. So with that caveat in place, let's get started. The first C of communication is clarity. It needs to be clear. And so clear is something that needs to be explicitly defined because it's not the same for everyone. What's clear for a 4-year-old is not going to be necessarily the same level of clarity that you would expect from someone who's in their mid-40s, right? So when we think about clarity, it needs to be clarity in relation to. It's a very relative concept about the people who you're talking to. So when you think about clear, you need to think about what is my audience, what's their education level? What's their reading comprehension level? What's the vocabulary they use? What's their learning style? And learning style is important because we often are much more receptive to words that align with how we take in information. So someone who is a visual learner will use visual words, will use words that involve sight and that will involve the way that they navigate and see the world around them. Someone who is more of a kinesthetic learner will be more action-oriented in the words that they leverage. Someone who is a more auditory learner is going to use those kinds of words. When you're packaging your communication, if you're communicating to a group of people, you want to make sure you layer all of these types of words really intentionally in a way that is going to hit home, because people are receptive to the kind of communication that aligns with their style of receiving information and how they take in information, generally speaking, outside of the context of the conversation. But it also speaks to your audience in general terms, right? Like, what are their likes and dislikes? Are they senior? If they're senior, do they have a lot of things on their plate? Does it need to be super short and sweet and simple, right? There are so many different things that play into clarity. So it's important that you build a bit of a profile, a bit of a user story of the people that you're communicating to, and then ask yourself, well, how do I make sure, what are the top 5 things, 3 to 5 things that I need to make sure that I keep top of mind so that I can be confident that this message is going to be clear. So that's the first step that you need to be mindful of, that clarity is relative, and you need to really know your audience, profile your audience, and think about all of the different things that play into whether a message is clear, right? And that includes some of the things that I mentioned mentioned above. Like, are they even like an English speaker if you're not speaking in your dominant language? Like, how do you make sure that your message is clear if you're speaking in a different language? So on and so forth. Now, the next C of communication that is super important is coherency. It needs to be coherent. And so when I say coherent, I mean that it naturally aligns, it flows, it works together. People aren't having to make logical leaps to be able to follow your point of view. And so if you're going from point A to point Z to point F to point G, if there's no logical continuity in the way that you're communicating your message, people are going to be required to exercise more energy to understand what you're saying, and you're going to lose a lot of people that way. People don't want to use more energy than what is the standard to be able to understand what you have to say. So if you're using words that are unnecessarily convoluted, if you're using technical language and your language doesn't align to your audience, if you are making deductions that aren't like naturally concluding deductions, if they're super technical, there's a lot of different like leaps and strides people need to make to get there, then it's not coherent. So coherency is about continuity, it's about how fluid it is, about how logically sound it is. It means that you're not making your audience do a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of mental labor to understand your point of view. So coherency is important. It's about matching. It's about making sure that everything flows, that it goes together. So you think about color schemes. There are different colors that are very coherent. They flow with one another. The same works with communication, with words, with ideas, with concepts. There are certain concepts that are it's much more difficult to build a bridge between those two concepts and other concepts, right? So you need to think about, well, how do I build my analogies? How do I build my examples? What are the scopes of reference that I'm going to use? And are they all coherent with one another, coherent with my message? Is there a logical continuity across these items? And if so, you're on the right path. But remember, coherence is also relative, right? So it needs to be examples that are specific to the people that you're speaking to, examples that relate to them on a day-to-day basis if they're operational, or that relate to them based on the work that you're into or what it is that you're all hoping to accomplish. Maybe it aligns with the strategic objectives, but just make sure that coherency is also contextually considered. And last but not least, I want to talk about concise. It needs to be as short as possible, and this is without compromising the message. So as short as possible isn't always going to be a specific number. It's not always going to be keep it to 5 minutes. Short could be minimum 40 minutes, right? But concise means your points are clear, your posts are coherent, and you're not taking people down these rabbit holes to understand what your perspective is, to understand what the ask is, right? But you're making sure that you give that presentation the time required. You're only giving as much information as is needed for people to really understand and then to be able to interact and to engage with the information. So concise is so important. And we used to do this exercise where we would take different government policies and we would have to read through them, like maybe 100 pages, and then build a one-pager. It's like, what are the key themes that you absolutely have to get across that they took 100 pages to write? And it becomes an exercise that you use in life. It's like the Occam's razor. Like, what is unnecessary? Like, what information is too much information that takes away from the core message in and of itself? And always think along those terms. If I have a core message that I want to communicate, how do I make sure that my core message isn't lost in the fluff, isn't lost in all of the extras that I want to put in because it makes it sound better or it makes me sound more eloquent, it makes me feel like I'm on top of the world. I mean, you don't want to be egocentric about your communication, because your communication just needs to be packaged for it to land, for people to do the things you want them to do with that information, right? So you need to make sure that it's concise, that is clear, that is coherent. And these are not things that come easily, right? Like when we talk, like we have a lot of words that we use a lot of the time to communicate a very simple message. And so this is why I call communication an act of service, because it does require deliberation, it does require reflection, it does require you to really think about the best way to package this message for the person that you're packaging it for so that it lands. And it's landing is not just for you, it's for them too, right? And again, like when you have a message and it's important, landing is your job, right? It is the act of service that you do on your own so that you get the objectives that you're looking for. So it's important that you do your homework, that you're prepared. And also like the fourth C, because I said at the end I wanted to add another C, and my fourth C is about collaboration, and it's about making sure that you create an engaging dialogue to make it so that it's not so comprehensive that people can't buy in and like plug in their own ideas, right? You want to make it a collaborative process always, because people are much more enthused at buying into your idea if they've had a role to play in building it out. So those are the 4 C's now of communication that I wanted to share with you, different tenets that you can bring into life and work that will enable you to be a stronger and more effective communicator. Now, if I have piqued your interest, if these are the kind of topics that you're interested in engaging in, if you're focused on self-mastery and all of the different ways that translates, whether that's soft skills or hard skills, then I definitely do invite you to check out out our website. Yes, we do offer live events twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our website. Now these events are paid events, so if you do see yourself participating in our community on an ongoing basis, then by all means check out our package plans. We do have package plans over and above the live events that give you the opportunity to attend workshops, webinars, and different sessions that enable you to interact and collaborate with like-minded people who are looking to develop the same types of skills. And of course, leadership starts young, and we believe in leadership in conjuvenescence, so leadership for children who are seeking to tap into their leadership potential, for parents who want to tap into their child's leadership potential, give them that sense of personal agency, that sense of accountability. And we have 4 key workshops that enable that, and these are parent-child workshops. So you're going to be working through these programs with your child, and is giving you language as well as giving them language and the competencies to think critically and to cultivate their intellectual development. And so those are the self-efficacy, autonomy, compassion, and self-concept modules. We have something for everyone in your family. And of course, if you're still here, definitely leave a like, follow us, share this video. We are on the road to 1K, and every follow definitely helps. So thank you again so much, and I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.